Reacting after the delivery of that full judgment by the Supreme Court bench, Senior Counsel James Orengo has warned that the country could be staring at a constitutional crisis should the IEBC fail to conduct the repeat polls within the 60 days as directed by the Supreme Court.
The country may be bordering on a constitutional crisis of grave proportion. A constitutional crisis in the sense that the powers that the president would normally enjoy were extinguished very substantially on the 8th of August 2017. And after the 8th of August, he was exercising temporary powers of incumbency. And the danger that we now find ourselves in is that if the elections are not held within 60 days, then he will not have the constitutional authority or legitimacy to continue to be in that office. If you read the Constitution purposively and have a constructive interpretation of the Constitution, Articles 138 to 140, you will find that the president, when not constitutionally in office, there would be a requirement that you have an acting president who is not the incumbent president until an election is held. So this particular constitutional crisis that we are getting ourselves into must be resolved as quickly as possible. And that can only happen if we have an election conducted.
All right, and for more on that, as we just put it into context, those statements there by Senior Counsel James Orengo. Joining me now is lawyer Duncan Okach from our City Centre studios. Duncan, are we really staring at a constitutional crisis as we are now as a country?
Akisa, the truth is that we are staring at a constitutional crisis. And the reason for that is because under Article 134 of our Constitution, we have the president currently sitting as an incumbent president, but on a temporary basis. That is what the Constitution calls temporary incumbency. And it actually means that he's sitting temporarily as he awaits the next president, having gone through the procedures under Article 136 in terms of elections, taking office. However, temporary means it's pending something. As of now, it is temporary pending the elections after 60 days. But after 60 days, Akisa, you'll notice that both the Constitution and the Supreme Court have not told us what will happen after that. And that is where we get a constitutional crisis, because we don't have a solution anchored or envisaged in law or in the Constitution or by the framers of the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And that is where we say we have a constitutional crisis, and most likely it requires a political solution. The problem we have at this particular stage is that even as we are on this particular moment, some people will say that the president remains president until another one is elected as per that particular provision. However, when you don't have a date when this particular new president is going to take over office, then the temporary part of it also fails. And that is where Senior Counsel James Orengo says that we may be staring at a constitutional crisis, whereby even the suggestion that the Speaker of the National Assembly could take office cannot suffice to come and rescue us, because he can only take office when there is a substantive president, yes, and a deputy, and unfortunately both of them cannot conduct their affairs of the office, either because of death of both of them, or maybe insanity of both of them, or something of that sort.
Legally, how do we deal with this?
There is no legal solution. That's why we are saying it is a constitutional crisis, because the supreme law of the land, that is the Constitution, does not afford us a solution. And that is why neither our courts, neither the laws will give us an answer. The answer normally in such situations is you get it from the political class, the politicians. And that's why they always say it's a political solution. And I think that's where people must start thinking very well, especially in the wake of the IEBC saying that they are not so sure they will conduct these elections on the 17th. But remember, even on the 17th is not the 60th day. They still have time. But also other factors coming into play, including the fact that the kits may not be ready, as indicated by the company that produced them, also come into play. But more importantly, you look at the Supreme Court ruling, which has also embedded several things that must be done. And looking at the time frame realistically, according to me, it is not possible. And that's why even when the president was giving his speech, you had him trying to buttress the fact that IEBC should tell us when we are supposed to go to an election. But again, it's not only a matter of going for an election, because the Supreme Court has pronounced itself. And the majority have said, if we do things the same way we did them on, in August 8th, they'll not hesitate but take us back to this particular position. So it's about, we are in a catch-22 situation where if we try and organize an election, chances are high it may be a sham election based on the fact that IEBC itself may not be adequately prepared to conduct a free, fair, credible election.
So in the event that we don't have an election in the next 60 days or within the 60 days, hypothetically speaking, where does that leave us as a country?
It leaves us with what the Jubilee government does not want to hear, and both what the NASA government doesn't, NASA opposition team doesn't want to hear. But or to some extent, some people say they want to hear that. That is, they have to find a solution, and the solution is how do we move forward? That will be a government of national unity. That will be the famous or infamous Nusu Mkate regime. But that still will be. They will need to anchor it into the Constitution so that they agree on the time frame that will, how that time frame will be, what period it will be for, because it should only be for a temporary period, because that also does not have the will of the Kenyan people. The Kenyan people want to be the ones who will choose who their leaders will be, and through the popular vote. So even that can be looked into. But again, in such situations where the Constitution doesn't give you answers, we have instances where the military takes over, and then we have a military takeover, and eventually they want to plan and give us another government, or say that they'll organize an election, but that becomes a military takeover. So it is a risky affair looking at it, and the sooner IEBC confesses that they cannot organize an election within the tenets given by the Supreme Court, the better, so that people can start looking at these other options and prepare ourselves for solutions rather than reacting in the last minute or after the die is cast.
Duncan Okach, a lawyer, joining us there from our City Centre studios, saying we are finding ourselves in a catch-22 situation as far as the election timelines are concerned for the fresh presidential elections. Thank you very much, Duncan, for joining us. We close